News on 6 is doing stories as part of Black History Month, starting with the legendary lawman Bass Reeves.
He was one of the earliest African Americans to serve as a Deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi River.
Many agree Reeves has not received the attention he deserves, like other iconic figures like Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Pat Garrett. But that's changing, in part thanks to Hollywood. We hit the road and the history books to learn more about an American hero in this Oklahoma's own original report. At the Fort Smith National Historic Site, not far from the 1838 historic barracks and jail building, there's a statue of a legendary lawman, Bass Reeves. One of the most respected and feared lawmen in Indian Territory.
Bass really was an iconic figure in American history.
Bass Reeves was born into slavery, escaped during the Civil War, and eventually became a Deputy U.S. Marshal out of Fort Smith, working for hanging judge Isaac Parker. Reeves would cross the Arkansas River on the trail of outlaws across more than 75,000 square miles in Indian and Oklahoma territories. Many of them were killers. He'd travel hundreds of miles on horseback to bring them to Judge Parker's court. Dave Kennedy is the curator of the new U.S. Marshals Museum in Fort Smith, where Bass Reeves will be featured prominently when the museum opens toward the end of the year.
He starts to become a success in the only part of the country where he could have become a success as a black man working in law enforcement.
Even without being able to read or write, Reeves worked 32 years as a deputy marshal, when most marshals out of Fort Smith served less than 5. His journeys into the territories would last for weeks. Our journey to find out more about Reeves takes us to Chicago. But why travel 700 miles to the Windy City?
Bass Reeves right there.
To meet Art Burton.
Bass was so tough that if he spit on a brick, it would break.
Burton is an author, historian, and an internationally known expert on Bass Reeves.
This is from the mayor of Kansas City.
Although he lives just outside Chicago, Burton grew up visiting relatives in Oklahoma and became fascinated with Reeves.
The greatest lawman in the Wild West was from Oklahoma.
Burton has researched African American figures on the western frontier, especially in Oklahoma and Indian territories, publishing several books. He says Oklahoma's been overlooked when it comes to frontier history.
The towns like Dodge City and those places, they were only wild 4 or 5 years. Oklahoma was wild for 30 or 40 years, and even going up in the Depression era.
It was so wild. Of the roughly 200 U.S. Marshals killed in the line of duty, 130 of them were killed in what would become Oklahoma.
The majority of Deputy U.S. Marshals who were killed in the line of duty were killed in a 50-mile radius of Muskogee.
It's estimated Bass Reeves arrested as many as 3,000 people during his career, including his own son for murder and his minister for selling illegal whiskey. He later became a Muskogee police officer to end his law enforcement career.
Bass Reeves was pretty much a phenomenon. He was 6'2", 190 pounds. They say he could whip any 2 men with his bare hands. If you got in a gunfight with Bass Reeves, it was tantamount to committing suicide.
But after statehood, outside the region, few people knew much about him.
He was pretty much forgotten.
Thanks to the work of Burton and by historians at places like the Fort Smith National Historic Area and the U.S. Marshals Museum, that's changing. Burton has optioned the rights to his book to Morgan Freeman. Freeman has wanted to do a project about the legendary lawman for years, and that isn't the only international attention Bass Reeves is now getting. In recent years, he's been the subject of a number of movies and television shows.
Deputy Marshal, Bass Reeves.
Some of the portrayals are obviously more accurate than others.
Way we can cut them off. Follow me.
The bottom line is more attention is being given to Bass Reeves, and more people are learning his story. A story of overcoming adversity, a remarkable true tale of service and justice.
I want the world to know that Bass Reeves really was the most prolific law enforcement officer our country has seen.
He's the greatest frontier hero in United States history.
And here's more good news. Yellowstone co-creator Taylor Sheridan and actor David Oyelowo are working with Viacom, CBS, and MTV Entertainment for a limited series on Bass Reeves. And although some historians disagree, Art Burton believes Bass Reeves was the inspiration of the Lone Ranger. It's all in his book, Black Gun, Silver Star. And here's one more thing, Lori. Burton just did an interview, texted me today, and he said he did an interview with People magazine today. So, and then film crews from Europe, from all over, are coming in to talk to him about it.
It's great that Bass Reeves is finally getting all that recognition because he deserves it.
Absolutely.
Great story, Craig. Thank you so much.